Hey, this is Nicholas with the Backyard TARDIS here with another Backyard TARDIS Random Thoughts podcast. Doing another one looking at and responding to some of the Red5Network podcasts. When I'm in the car listening to Red5Network podcasts, oftentimes they bring up topics, discussion, and I think in my head what I would say if I was there at the recording table with them. And so I just like to take a moment to kind of respond to some of those. Before I get into that, some of what's going to come up, I originally was going to do Star Wars Visions, Marvel What If, and Star Trek Lower Decks review as a big podcast. I've since realized that I cannot cover all of those in one podcast. So I'm not going to even try. I'm going to split out What If and Visions into their own individual podcasts. And so those will probably be what I'm going to do next. And then I'm going to take Lower Decks. I do not want to talk about that episode by episode. I just kind of want to talk overall about the show. And then maybe I'll throw in some Masters of the Universe, Bad Batch, maybe even Camp Cretaceous. You know, just some of the cartoons in this year that I'm liking. And more about the overall feel and likes and dislikes instead of episode by episode. But Visions and What If really need that episode by episode breakdown because every episode is very different. Okay, and then the other thing, going into November, I'm going to try to do a number of videos Stargate related, and I definitely will want to do a podcast that is just talking about why I love Stargate, things about Stargate. Haven't figured out what it will be, but I will have a Stargate centered one. All right. Start off with Scarif itself. He talked about Roe brought up weaponizing news, and that's something definitely that you see people do. But I don't know if it's always necessarily if everyone doing it is geared towards weaponizing. There's definitely people who the moment they hear a bit of news that's towards their type of thinking, they share it, they point it out. Of course, we're talking about nerdom. We're talking about Star Wars news in this subject, but realistically, this is news in general. This is whether it's political news, whether it's news about anything really. Sports news, like anytime something reaffirms how you feel, we have a kind of inherent tendency to point it out and go, hey, look, see here. And you'll see the other side will get some other piece of news and they'll go, oh no, look, see here. And so it's not surprising that as much as we see that going on in the political field right now, that we're seeing that happen in the Star Wars field too. And of course, those that make a career out of following this stuff, the algorithm definitely seems to jump on and notice that trend. So there are people who push really hard and weaponize it, as you said. But I think generally, as nerds though, when we hear a bit of controversial news, like we like to talk, like when we had George Lucas's ex-wife, when she got on and she said her piece about the sequels, of course, that was just juicy topic of discussion. But it's true. She's not, the end-all, be-all authority. Drop down. She said that, okay, that ends this argument as it's being treated. However, it is a strong point, and she definitely deserves her point of view. Next point, you talked about vigilantes. What makes a vigilante and vigilante versus superhero? And to me, I find this concept interesting because I feel like it's, and I was actually talking about this in the Salty Nerd Discord recently with some of his other Discord members. This subject came up, and I look at different universes use those words differently. And when I think of vigilante, I think of somebody who doesn't necessarily have like superpowers. I think of somebody like Batman, like Green Arrow, they may eventually become superheroes, but they start out as vigilantes, people who are fighting crime. Some of them are anti-heroes, but kind of that thing where the police don't accept their help. The police are going after them just as much as they are the criminals, but they're out there doing that. Whereas a superhero is when someone with like unbelievable power, like Superman, shows up and they just go, yeah, he's a superhero. He's free to do. The police are not trying to capture Superman and tell him to stop saving, falling planes out of the sky. Batman's beating up, drug lords and stuff. Green Arrow's, shooting an arrow into, crime bosses. The cops are not cool with that. To them, that's no different than gang-on-gang violence. They don't see an innocent party there in their eyes. But when you have someone like Superman who is just, nobody's getting hurt, nobody's that, and he's handing them over, even though he has no formal training in law enforcement or the legal system or anything like that, he's just accepted. And that was what makes him a superhero. But what's interesting is when you go over to the Marvel Universe, it's very different. Because you have somebody like Iron Man, you go, oh, well, then Iron Man should be a vigilante. Except that Iron Man is somebody who's accepted by the government. He's open and public about who he is and what his secret identity is. You have Hawkeye and Black Widow. They're agents of the government. So they're not vigilantes. They're not working outside the law like that. However, Spider-Man, superpowered, he's treated as a vigilante. There are people in the city, J. Jonah Jameson, who are going after him. A lot of times when you look at early Spider-Man, cops are trying to figure out who this is. They have this sudden boom of problem. There's all these new freaky people that, are all Spider-Man's villains. And Spider-Man's just lumped into that. They don't really see him as different at first. He's just another guy who's battling these people, causing damage to the city. They want him off the streets. The X-Men are mutants. They're sending giant robots to take these things out. But Iron Man, Hawkeye, and Black Widow aren't. And so it just, once again, the vigilante, in my opinion, is all the eye of the public beholder. And it's true for us outside of the comics. Like, if we say Batman's a superhero, he's a superhero, whether he has superpowers or not. Of course, you could say his brain's superpower, he's this. And of course, over the course of the comics, he has had periods when he's had extreme superpower. He's had the Green Lantern ring, he's, different things. But in universe, it's how the universe views them that defines whether or not they are in universe a superhero. So like Batman starts out definitely not. He's definitely a vigilante. When you get to later in life, when Batman's building the Watchtower for the Justice League, and he's sitting there on a council with Superman and Wonder Woman and the Flash and all these different heroes, and he's held it right up there. Well, yeah, he at that point the world is viewing him as a superhero. When he's recognized on a global scale like that. When he's just in Gotham taking out local crime, he's not considered a superhero in universe. He's considered a vigilante. Just kind of my thing. And then, I already forgot it. I'll have to look it up and share it with you guys. But I did this for there's a French film that is basically like the origins of like Zorro and Batman, and he is basically like the same backstory as Batman, the first like iteration of that from before those. I'm definitely gonna have to look that up and share that with you, or on the Science Fictionary on our Pillars of Adventure. I put that one in there, so check that out. Chantel, you mentioned that you are afraid of butterflies. And you also mentioned that if there was a rat, that you would befriend it. I am no stranger to inordinate fears. I have an inordinate fear of snakes. It could be the littlest, teeniest garter snake that, little runner snakes, like little things that can't hurt you any way, shape, or form. I can't do them. And I have pet frogs. I got all the lizards, iguanas. Like I've had all that. Can't do snakes. So I have no problem with reptiles or amphibians. But snakes, no, can't do that. So I get that. But butterflies physically cannot hurt you in any way. A mosquito is more dangerous than a butterfly. A butterfly cannot bite you, but a wild rat can. And rats are cool as pets, I agree. But the idea that you'd be okay befriending a rat, but not a butterfly, I want to see you get over this. So I don't know if you ever come out to California, but it used to be called Marine World, but it's like Six Flags Animal Kingdom or something like that. But if you go there, they've got a room, thousands of butterflies. I think it could break you of this. Anyways, I know I got my own irrational fears. Not trying to rag on you, but yeah, when you were talking about that in the same podcast and then talking about how you'd be okay with a rat, that really got me. Okay, next up, when to do a remake or to do a reboot. This is interesting. I've never, there are a ton of classic movies that I go, these are timeless. These shouldn't be remade. However, it's really a generational thing. I think it really depends upon when we get to a point that a younger generation would be unwilling to do it. I was recently talking to Matthew Kadish, and he said, he doesn't do any movies. He doesn't like any movies made before 1960. That's just his thing. And I'm like, there's a ton of classic movies that I love from that period, but like the style, he just doesn't work for him. I look at like no, I won't say that because that's sacrilegious. But there's even some of our amazing sci-fi movies that we love from the 70s and 80s that I say are untouchable. They're timeless. You stick a kid down today, and pacing is completely different in movies today. And there are just some movies that, although perfect, you cannot get kids today to watch it. I always find that amazing. Like, there are certain cartoons from like the 40s that my daughter will fall in love with. And some of the cartoons that I want to show her that are from like the 90s, some of them she likes, but there's some of them like she just cannot do. She just cannot get into that style or format. But if it has kind of what the current animation style is, if it looks anything like what Paw Patrol and Blaze and all those shows look like, it draws her right in. And I've noticed like it's a trend. So like a lot of people from this age, will knock on like Cal Arts or something, but people are into it. So I look back at some of the movies that I really love that I think are classics, only to find out that movies that I love from like the 60s and stuff, and some from the 50s that I consider Disney classics, are remakes of live-action Disney films from just 20 to 30 years before that. So stuff like Swiss Family Robinson. I really love that. Robinson Crusoe. Like, there are some movies that Disney already remade that I consider like, oh, that's the classic. The new version, that's such a bad reboot. And you look back and you do some research on what the reception is, when like there were people deriding them then as being, an unnecessary reboot, a worse version. Sometimes they were looked at, wow, what a better version. But to me, like, they're the classics. They're back when it was good, and some of the stuff that have come out recently are like, man, why are they rehashing it? And there's some that I've already experienced them rehashing it in the 90s, and they're rehashing it again. It's being announced as coming out again. I like the 60s version, but there's a 40s version that is truly the original that I've never even seen. So I do think that there is some merit to bringing some of this stuff back. But it's not for the generation that grew up. And so we're always at this odd period where we look at it, when something comes out 40 years later and they reboot it, it's not for you. However, they need to make sure they do it well. They need to make sure, because sometimes they reboot these things and it doesn't have enough to make the next generation actually remember that movie, so that they can complain in 40 years when it's rebooted again. But there definitely are certain movies that I feel like are timeless. But I do think that at a certain point, they'll get remade. And to some point, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I typically don't like remakes of stuff that are classic movies that I like, but at the same time, it keeps those properties in the greater pop culture vocabulary. Okay, and then you did your one on Western. So I thought, I love Western, so I thought I'd figure out and drop in my top 5 Westerns. So my number 1 Western is TOS, Star Trek, the original show. That is such an amazing Western. Love it. Number 2, this is a more recent one. Totally digging The Mandalorian. Total gunslinger, just the music. Beautiful Western. I am a big fan of Firefly, and this is very much the bank heist type Western. They're going from town to town, trying to make it big, riding away from the law. Great Western. I, of course, love Back to the Future 3. That, who does not love hoverboards in their Westerns? It's just an amazing movie. And then my other one that I love Lost in Space. I think Lost in Space is a wonderful Western family frontier story. So those are my top 5 Westerns. Of course, all joking aside, Westerns is something that as a kid, I thought I didn't like. I avoided them. I didn't, Westerns. Which is funny, because there's certain periods of time that I was never really into. And I was never really into the Old West. Just like I was never really into, I don't care for, Civil War, Revolutionary War era. That has never been, but, give me more medieval times, whether it be Renaissance or even through the Dark Age. That period fascinates me over in Europe. But the moment we started getting into muskets and all that kind of stuff, all of a sudden I lose interest in that time period. But I'm coming around to a lot of that stuff. And I have recently caught myself, I don't know, this is a good Western, that's a good Western. But if there's a Western on TV and maybe somebody else is watching, if I end up sitting there for 10 minutes, I'm then engaged. I'm then met. So it's only a matter of time before I go into my Western nerdy deep dive. Because I know there's a lot of great content there to tap. It's just when I have the time, because it's definitely something that's appealing to me much more. But you see a lot of parallels in sci-fi, as I just brought out with my little joke. Okay, switching over. Certain Point of View podcast. You know, you talked about the Mario movie casting, Illumination. And he said, why is Chris Pratt Mario? And there's one reason and one reason only. And that's because of star power. This is such a weird casting to me because Mario, like, I expected a celebrity, but with Mario, he's been celebrities before. He was like a wrestler guy on one of the cartoon shows. They had like intros. But it's always been a guy that kind of looks Italian, kind of talks like that, does different things. And sometimes he's Italian, sometimes he's like New York Italian, but he's always kind of Italian. He's kind of have that, and they've had actors that can fit kind of that profile. Of course, this is an animated movie, but it's Chris Pratt doing the voice, and I just don't... Chris Pratt's a good voice actor. The other stuff he's voiced has been good. I just don't see him as Mario. And I think if they try to have him do a Mario accent, it'll sound no different than the rest of us doing a Mario. Like everybody can do, it's me, a Mario. I did see some people point out that, you know, the guy who does Mario, because everybody's saying, why doesn't he? He doesn't do that voice prolonged. Like, he just does a couple of one-liners. So he might not actually be able to do that voice as we all envision, doing just lots amount of dialogue. So this could be a big change for Mario. You talked about what should be the next Bond. So on this one, I am going to say I have a unique take. So my favorite Bond is Roger Moore, followed closely by Sean Connery. And what I like about Roger Moore is, yes, I am somebody who likes the campiness, so I do like Moonraker. I'm sorry, not sorry. That's something I enjoy. But what I think makes him Bond, and it's something that Sean Connery had too, and I think Pierce Brosnan too, to quite an extent, I thought was very close to Roger Moore. In that, in Roger Moore's era, it was about the suave. There was also a lot about the gadgets. The gadgets were, I think, went to the ninth. They went a little above and beyond at a certain point, like Moonraker and stuff like that, and submarine cars and stuff like. It was very sci-fi element to it. But I liked that. So where would I like to see Bond go next? Well, I agree with you. I would like to see Bond back in the 60s. I would like to see... I like stuff like Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. I like alternative history, so I want to see gadgets in a world where there isn't gadgets. You know, right now, a recorder in your shoe seems dumb when we have cell phones, right? Like, that's not special. But get back those classic kind of gadgets and bring back the suave, where it's not so much about the running and gunning, but it's about the conversation at the table, the cards, so to speak. You know, just playing the mind games and back and forth, trying to get information, smooth around. I really like that Roger Moore in that. So that's what I would like. Who I think could do it, because it's got to be a British actor, right? I want to say somebody I think that could do the role. Hello there. Obi-Wan himself as James Bond. Yes, that is who I am suggesting. I actually think he could pull the suave off really well. And it's just my thought. Now, provided they don't go back to the 60s like that, I really think that they should focus, since they're having so much trouble getting these Bond movies out, getting an actor to want to commit, I think this is a universe that could be a cinematic universe. Bond movies used to come out every year or every other year. Now they're coming out every 5 years. Let's get back to every other year, and let's do that. And you go, well, there's so much more cost and production. The MCU is dropping like $500 million cost movies a year, and they're raking the money back. There's no reason that Bond couldn't be a huge tentpole movie every year, and they just have to do like the MI6 kind of connected universe. And it doesn't have to be connected universe in the idea that, oh, we're going to meet this agent, we're going to meet that agent, and then we're going to have the MI6 Avengers. No, connected universe in that you can have common, like, enemy organizations, maybe the same person playing M, that kind of thing. Q, just these certain parts of it can be connected in that you have an idea that these happen in the same universe, and these are just MI6 movies or 00 movies, and just do some of the different agents. This would allow you to diversify and create original new characters without upsetting a good portion of the fan base by gender, race swapping, all that kind of stuff. And it would allow you to put different directors, different actors on these projects so that these movies could come out either yearly or every other year. That's just my thought on what they should do with Bond. Let's go try to do this as a different order from last time. Next time we'll do Salty Nerd Podcast. You were talking about seeing and the frustration Matt Vader had with it being 8 episodes versus the 24 episodes that we are used to, that we grew up with. I miss that too. And I think we've gotten to a generation that people feel that this is superior. The moment an episode doesn't significantly move the plot along, everyone cries, "It's a filler episode! It's a filler episode!" Sorry. A lot of talking. So, to me, I like filler episodes. I like shows that are almost nothing but filler episodes, where the episode that's not a filler episode is like the big event episode. Shows like Star Trek, shows like Stargate, they were that way. I may have to cut this short just for my voice. But I also know that there's a thing that William Shatner did, a little documentary he made called The Captains, and he interviews each of the captains. Pretty much every one of them went through divorce during their time on Star Trek, with the exception of Archer, who went through a divorce during Quantum Leap, for the same reason. The shows are so demanding that happens. I know I've watched LeBron Burton, Jodie LaForge's daughter. She talks. She cannot stand Star Trek. Captain Janeway, she talked in that thing that her kids, Star Trek is like a 4-letter word in the household. They hate it. They vehemently hate that franchise. So I think it was too much. Too much to do, 24 or 22 episodes in a year. However, 8 is way too short. 10 is way too short. 12 is way too short. And especially when they do that, and then sometimes they have 2-year gaps in between seasons of some of these shows. I think we need to get back to doing 16 to 18. Not so crazy that you get some really bad episodes that we have to have clip show episodes, but at the same time, the writers get a break, the actors get a break, but we're still getting a significant amount of content. That's what I think is a sweet spot. We've gone to this point where we've got all the filler out. Nobody's developed. It's just kind of fast paced, which makes it then feel like a watered down movie instead of a TV show. And it does become watered down movie because now it's too much exposition to be a movie. It's not designed to be tight and compact, but it doesn't give enough air for it to breathe as a TV show. So, other thing, you were talking about C, and I think you were really upset that, like, the character that David Hewlett plays, like, that he came up with dynamite and gunpowder. And then, like, you thought they were building up, like, he was going to fix Sight and all that. I really think this is a situation where you let your hype outweigh the reality, because dynamite and gunpowder, when you look at the world of C and how backwards it, like, how revolutionary that is, how revolutionary that was when that was developed, that basically made the Western civilization the dominant power on the planet. Because prior to that, Europe was actually wimps compared to, some of the African nations, the Asian nations. You look at the great empires they had, and it wasn't until, like, the invention of gunpowder and stuff that Europe, when they were developing cannons and guns and all that, they just started to dominate the world. So I think being someone who reinvents it, like, that is a big deal. But you had like these ideas of miracle cure, and I think the amount of seasons they're into see, they can't cure blindness because it's the premise of the show. That's going to happen like last season or end of season before the last season. They'll cure blindness, and then they'll have a season about the ramifications of that, if they ever do. But that's just a point I wanted to bring out. Okay. One I haven't talked about before, Christian Fandom Geek. So he talked about being nice to others. That it's okay to disagree, but we got to be nice and decent to people. And I agree. We need to keep in mind that there is a person on the other side of that Twitter conversation, on the other side of that YouTube content. There's a real person. And we all have opinions. And when we're like in something like the Star Wars fandom and we're talking about our opinions, at the end of the day, like, that's not what we define people as. Like, if you had a neighbor and you were good buddies with a neighbor and you thought, man, that's a stand-up guy, and he were to tell you something about how he felt about The Last Jedi and it was different from what you felt, you wouldn't instantly go, oh man, my neighbor's a horrible person, and I wish he'd just go jump off a cliff. No. So why are we telling people that online? Why are we being so dramatic with people online when this is a fandom? This is like, yeah, it's fun to disagree and to kind of argue and have nerdy chat back and forth. But at the end of the day, like, these things don't actually define whether a person's good or not. They're opinions on a movie. So, be kind. Be nicer. And then you talked about Superman and the values and the all-American value, and how the American values on paper are one thing and in practice are another. And one of the things that I like about that is when you look at where he's from, he's a small town, Smallville, in Kansas, and there are places like this where these values are followed, and it's to me, Superman is not so much about the American way of like anybody can this business and prosperity and all that and acceptance to all, like, that's not so much what I feel when I heard like the American way or something. I always think of the value Superman has is he has small town, middle America, farmland, little small town values, family values, and he goes to the big city and they don't have the values. Like, even Lois Lane, like, she doesn't have those values. She makes fun of Clark for having these values, for viewing the world. And Superman it always seems like he's a little naive, but he just wants to believe in the good in people. And this is small town, everybody helps everybody out. We do it just because. And that's very true. But in the big cities, that's not. And that's one of the things that makes Superman unique, is they put him in the big city. And they put him with all the self-centered, everything that goes against his values. And he stands for his values. And it's not just the villains, but it's just people in general. He's surrounded by that. But he has a faith in humanity. And he is that, and a big part of that is because he was, raised in this small town by good, hardworking farmers. And it is a unique culture and perspective, big part of his backstory. They also said about how it's really hard to write for Superman. And I know you don't believe that, but how writers seem to think that. And to me, I say hogwash. I look at the animated series. I look at, Smallville had a hit and miss, but for the most part, the New Adventures of Lois and Clark that we had back in the 90s. I look at even the new Superman and Lois show on the CW. Like, it's starting out really good. People are able to write Superman. And I think the big thing is Superman is not about him having limits. It's not about that. It's about him walking on eggshells. He could beat every bad guy in seconds and destroy buildings and kill people in the process, kind of like we saw on Invincible. He could be like that. But he's walking on eggshells. And everybody around him is super vulnerable. Everybody in his life, every enemy he makes, he's making enemies of people with, insurmountable, unfathomable amount of power. And, he's got all these loved ones around. And so that's where the drama of that, and trying to keep a secret identity, because Superman is Clark Kent. Whereas, Bruce Wayne is Batman, Superman is Clark Kent. Clark Kent is his real personality. And it's very precious to him, but the demands of being Superman, always the pull on that, there are just tons of stories to tell in that. And the fact that writers today go, well, he's a boring because he's a Gary Stu and is this, and you can't write for him, and we're trying to make him interesting, and we're trying to change up the formula or change him because he's just so boring. No, he's not. There's so many great stories have been told. So much room for more. Another one I haven't brought up here, but that I love, Blue Milk Cafe. And I just want to take a moment to say that I know you are known as, Jeff, is you just positive, love everything, huge fan of Jar Jar Binks, love the prequels, sequels, everything. And I always love it when you try to broach that you don't like something, and you're very much, don't come at me, please. It's okay. We all, we like what we like, and we don't like what we don't like, and that's okay. And we're nerds, so we're going to discuss it, but it's okay. So you went over Visions. Visions wasn't yours. One of the things that I thought was interesting is Tattoon Rhapsody was one of the ones you liked the best, and most people didn't. And that was one that when I watched, I said, that feels very Star Warsy. For kids, but very Star Warsy. And because it was a ton of Star Wars references, and I think that's why you really liked it. Even though a lot of other people were like, oh, no, it was kiddie, they're a band, like that wouldn't happen in the Star Wars universe. But you asked for like some more detail on some of these, or some insight. And one of the things with the Japanese culture is that they're coming at this, they're not super concerned with canon. They're not going, well, this is between this period and this period. That you'll notice like a lot of these are kind of like set during Order 66, and you're sitting there in your head, no, they're just looking at the concept of Order 66, and they go, that is a neat philosophical idea, and I want to tell a story about that. So it's not like it's Dark Sidious Order 66. It's just kind of the concept of a period when Jedis are hunted down by Inquisitor. Like, that's what they got them. And there's a lot of references or similar things to that. So like you saw in the Ninth Jedi, that was really cool. Like the changing of the saber cord. Like, they like the symbolism. They like the messaging of Star Wars more than necessarily the canon that we're really stuck on in the West, which is okay. The canon's great. I love that, which is why I love that they didn't try to make this canon. They didn't try to put it in there, but they said, no, go off on your own, do your own thing. And I think that was really great. The Elder, you were kind of, were like, what was with the end of that? What was that? This is, once again, this is looking at like the concept of Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. The person who wrote that episode, you could totally tell that they were big fans of episode 1. And they just wanted to see that kind of concept of like wise, more patient mentor, and more energetic, ready to serve Jedi of the Obi-Wan Qui-Gon relationship, and just see an adventure of that. And so that's what you're getting. One random adventure, as if we had gotten Clone Wars episodes that were of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan going on adventures from prior to episode 1. That's kind of what this could be. Then you have like one like Toby, or TOB1-B1. This little robot, it is 100%. You have the animation of Astro Boy, and then something that takes inspiration from Astro Boy is Mega Man, and you very much got the story of Mega Man being told. But there's a lot of symbolism. You know, this guy's Padawan had died. He's basically put his soul or essence into this droid, and so there's a lot of symbolism going on. But Mega Man is a character who his father built him to be his son, his little helper. And he sees injustice in the world going on, and he dreams of going out there and becoming that. And he's foolhardy, and he ends up going out and he becomes Mega Man. So he starts out, he's Rock, he's his son, and then he becomes Mega Man. And he goes out, he defeats the bad guy, and then he lives a life of doing that. And he gets to the point where he realizes that he wants peace, he wants tranquility. Am I destined to always be in the fight, in the struggle? His father dies, and his father in Mega Man looks identical to the creator builder guy in this. And so there's just so many parallels to that. So this is not Star Wars. This is, that done with a Star Wars flavor. And so I really think that this is one, like, you have to be a fan of that to appreciate this, because it's leaning more towards that than it is Star Wars. The one with the twins, I wasn't a big fan of that one, but once again, you're looking at, this is somebody who probably liked The Last Jedi. This is somebody who liked all the stuff about the Force dyads, but they also like Luke and Leia. And so this idea of twins that are a dyad in the Force, and the good and the light, and all this, and the powering through that, being magnified by their own soul and the Kyber crystal and all that. Very much, very anime, very like a Sailor Moon type concept of like how the power affected it. Very yin yang, which George Lucas was really big into. So I do think that there is a lot of Star Wars in these, but I do agree with you that a lot of the stories leave off. And I think that if you have one that you think interests you, that you would like to see more of, you're like, I like that, but it left me wanting. Be vocal about it. because Disney is listening. Because every one of those animation studios could do a season of a show. Because they're all different studios. They could all be pumping out content. And it's really based on what's getting interest. We've already seen the first one, the one where the lady had the umbrella lightsaber thing, which was cool. It's already got its own prequel comic to it or something like that. So coming out in Japan. So they are willing to expand on some of these. Okay. Next, we are going to talk about Sidebar Cantina. And they complained about their iPhone for small hands. I've always hated Dreamcast. My ultimate system of all time. Thing I hate about it is the small controllers. So I am right there with you. I don't like stuff that is made for small hands. But you gotta admit, iPhones have always been... That's why I never became an iPhone person. Is because iPhones, they're always getting smaller, more little screens. I can't do that. So they always seem to be catering towards people with small hands. So that's just kind of my thing. You talked about music of 91. I gotta say, I was Rebang Garth. That was pretty much, that was my country phase back in 91. Kind of pretty much 90 to about 95. I just listened to country. And a lot of Garth Brooks. Loved Garth Brooks back then. A lot of Reba McEntire right there around 91. You talked about, once again, talking about the Star Wars Visions and how Lucasfilm keeps going back to the well of the Jedi Padawan that survives Order 66, going on when you were talking about Tatooine Rhapsody. Now, here's the thing. Lucasfilm didn't write this script at all. And once again, this is Japanese artists going in and they're looking at themes of Star Wars more than they are Star Wars canon. So they don't care. This is not a real character that exists. So, yeah, you have Ezra and you have Ahsoka and you have Kanan and you have Cal Kestis. And so you're right. There are getting a whole bunch of these. But this really isn't adding to that. This is just kind of Japanese interpretation. So that was just my two little blips there for Sidebar Cantina. Now the last big one, we're going to talk science fictionary. We're going to close out with them today. So you talked about What If and Loki being the giant frost giant. So my understanding was that Odin used a thing on Loki to transform him into an Asgardian. So just like Loki has the ability to use his stuff to change himself into different beings, like an alligator, Odin had the ability to change his body from that of a frost giant to an Asgardian. So he has an Asgardian body in there, but that's through the power of Odin. That's just my understanding of how the MCU... Now, I don't know if that's canon, but that's how I've always viewed it. You talked about the Game of Thrones reading order, and this just made me laugh because it reminded me trying to explain to my friends how to watch Clone Wars episodes. You got to go online and you got to get the list because you got to watch some of season 3 first, and then you go back and watch some season 1, and then you're going to do season 2, but you're going to have a couple episodes of season 6 that you need to insert there, and anyways, just me that. And then you guys were talking about DS9, that you're in the first 2 seasons of DS9 and really liking it. I'm going to tell you right now, if you really like the first 2 seasons of DS9, you are going to love that show. Because it doesn't get good till season 4. So, if you're already liking it in the first 2 seasons, you're going to absolutely love that show. Because DS9 and Voyager are both, the first 3 seasons are rough. Once you go back and once you've seen the whole show, you go back, you really appreciate all the characters. You love a lot of those early episodes. But there was a lot of growth that happened, and you'll notice the change. It's when Worf steps onto the show, the whole gears of the show completely changes, and it just adds so much effort. Just like on Voyager, when Kes leaves, you got 7-9 comes on, and they make the Delta Flyer, and suddenly, like, it's a whole different show. It's a whole different show. That doesn't mean that there weren't amazing Doctor episodes from the first 3 seasons of Voyager. There are. But after you have those changes, they get rid of some of the things that weren't working. They added things that definitely worked, definitely brought the show better. So, all I've got to say is you've got good things ahead of you, and I can't wait for you guys to talk about it. Let's see. I've got a note here. Oh, canon. You discussed, what is canon and that. And I, too, have to say that I am really upset with the Lucasfilm Story Group. I know you were worried you're going to get some backlash on this, and I'm not going to give it to you. I'm going to tell you right now that, while everything doesn't have to necessarily fit into canon, I think that what they did to the expanded universe was, I thought it was a good idea to get rid of it, but not completely. Like, when they labeled it, it's going to be Legends. But then what did they do with that? They made it impossible for it to be Legends. Exaggerated stories, because they didn't at least, like, there's some key points, like Mara Jade needed to exist. The Solo kids, they needed to exist. Now we've got Ben Solo. Like, that completely conflicts. So you go back and read any of those books that cannot mesh with current Star Wars. Had they just named him not Ben Solo, but named him after one of the kids from the books, or made Rey and Ben, twins, done it off of the books, just that little bit. They don't have to follow the story at all, but just put the characters there, so that then all that other stuff, it could be Legends, it could be hearsay, it could be maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. But now you try to rectify that with what is canon. You go, yeah, that couldn't have happened. And they do all that, and what is it for? The goal of, now we're going to have a consistent canon. Big company like Disney, they don't want to have to sit there and go through decades of novels. But when the cartoons and the books that are coming out aren't lining up, when comics and the cartoons aren't lining up, when The Mandalorian and some of the books that have recently come out are not lining up, to me, that says massive failure on the storybook group. Like, that's their job. Like, how is there a whole group of people that are employed doing this, and they're not accomplishing this? That just shocks me. Okay, last one from the Science Fictionary. Will prequels be liked? And why is the OT unanimously liked, but the prequels and the sequels, like, we're seeing that the prequels, people have grown up, they're starting to like it. And I think the OT has the benefit of there wasn't anything before it. So there isn't a generation of people who go, it was better back in my day. We are going to see, probably, I think it's already happening, but in the next 20 years, probably 40 years, we're going to see a group of people who are going to not like the OT. They're going to say it's too old, and while I hope it's not in my lifetime, I definitely think the OT is going to eventually, don't want to say it, get remade. I avoided saying it earlier. I don't think it should be remade. I don't want it to be remade. It's going to happen. Unfortunately, it will happen. And I think that's just how, generations. But then, they'll get a chance to redo the prequels. So, hey, I was a person who, I thoroughly loved Episode 1. I hated Episode 2 and walked out of the theater on Episode 3 because of how much I hated Episode 2. When Anakin turned, I was like, I don't buy it, and I walked out. And then I decided that what came after that was like the best part of that movie, so then I didn't walk out of The Last Jedi because I was like, I did that last time and I regretted it. But I agree that I think there are some people who it's always going to be divisive, but I do think that in a decade or two, it will be a lot more liked. And while, yes, The Mandalorian is more, when you're talking about the different things, I do think all the mention of Rey, like I think Rey as a character is going to stand the test of time. I think she's going to become beloved, kind of like Obi-Wan. And that I look at all the little girls cosplaying her, and I look at that and I go, yeah, those movies don't have the magic. But people are going to latch onto that character. People who grew up cosplaying, like, they're going to be in their 30s loving that character. And it doesn't matter that the movies are disjointed or whatever. It's just what it is. And we can try to lie to ourselves. We can tell ourselves that because those movies aren't good, like that's never going to happen. Whatever, however we feel about those movies. But the truth of it is, it's going to happen. Will it be to the same extent of the prequels? Not unless somebody like Filoni does a cartoon or something that like fills in a lot of the gaps and makes us OT fans and prequel fans out there fall in love with the characters. Because I think the prequels are still bad movies for the most part. But I love the characters. Even though I greatly dislike the characters in most of the movies. But the whole overall arcing story I can get behind because I've learned to love the characters from the cartoons. I think the same could be done for the sequels, and I know a lot of people, I don't want any content about any of that. After Revenge of the Sith, I was so mad I threw all my stuff away. I threw out all my Star Wars books. I gave away all my Lego sets. I was done with Star Wars. I had a massive collection. I had all the cans from episode 1, the Pizza Hut box that had Star Wars on, like from episode 1. I had everything. I got most of it. I threw in the dumpster. I just got rid of it. I was just so angry, so mad. And I always, when people say like they're done with Star Wars is dead, it's over for me. It's like, I've been there, I've done that. And I was really late to the Clone Wars show because I went and watched the movie and didn't like the movie. And so I didn't watch the cartoon show until years later. And then I think I saw like an episode of like season 5 or season 6 and was like, whoa. And then I went back and I watched it. And now I'm like, young Obi-Wan. I love that character. Hello there. Like, I just love all the memes. Love it. Anakin. Oh, yeah. Anakin's cool. I hated Anakin in the prequels. He was why I hated the prequels. So for me, as much as we all say that, I could see people not watching any Star Wars content for the next 10 years. They come out with a kick-ass cartoon that really drives people home about it. It's going to win people back. Not everybody, not most people, but there'll be people that will be brought back. And I don't think that is wrong to, you know, I've seen some get upset at the notion that Clone Wars did that. I think that's okay. Anyways, I'm running out of time here. Thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you in the next Random Thoughts podcast. Have a good day.